Minute past 1, we have a quorum, so I'd like to officially call this meeting to order. First, may I have the roll?
Yes, I'll read the roll. Please let us know if you're here. Councilwoman Campbell, District Deputy Commissioner Deitchley, Councilman Fish, Commissioner Fleming.
Here.
Councilman Graham.
Here.
Commissioner Groninger.
Here.
Councilwoman Groninger. Councilwoman Hammond. Councilman Hicksonbaugh.
Here.
Mayor Jenkins.
Here.
District Deputy Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Mayor Mueller. Commissioner Overmeyer.
Here.
Mayor Robertson. Councilman Root.
Here.
Mayor Center. Mayor Stutzman. Mayor Tallmer. Commissioner Wyrick.
Here.
Mayor Wood.
Here.
We have a quorum of members present.
Thank you. So next we have the minutes for November 9th.
Move to approve.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. Next we have the financial report.
Before we
sorry.
get to finances, we do have the nominating committee.
Oh, I missed. I'm
Yep,
so
it's
sorry.
okay. And I can brief on that if you'd like. So the way that MACOG does our board is that we have a executive committee. That executive committee usually takes over after the January meeting. So in December, we ask for a nominating committee. It's usually 3 or so representatives. We'll always welcome more. That lead a highly scrutinized vetting process where, if you're not familiar, our executive, essentially what we do, what has been the norm is every member who's on exec moves up into a new role, and then we backfill one position as long as everyone's willing to serve. So really, I end up sending a lot of emails to confirm with existing members that they want to move up, and then we talk with 1 or 2 other individuals to see who might want to fill in. So we're looking for roughly 3 volunteers to serve on that nominating committee, so that then we can present a slate of officers for the January meeting.
I'll be happy to help again.
All right.
Mayor Jenkins.
I would be happy to assist.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That's all that we needed on that item.
Great, thank you. So now Deb was walking up, so I got a little distracted. Deb, would you want to do the financial report, please?
All right, good morning, everybody. Hopefully you all have the October financial report in your packet. Our year-to-date expenses through fiscal year 2023, end of October, is 2.5 million, almost 2.6 million, which is about 30% of our annual budget. Our cash balance at the end of October was $2,853,712.33, and our cash disbursements for the month of October was $640,022.44. Does anyone have any questions? If not, I'd like to ask for board approval of the October 2022 financial report.
Move to approve. Second.
First and a second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Secretary. Any modifications?
Nothing from me.
Okay, so what about modifications?
Yeah, the modifications are included in your packet. These are small changes that this board has provided staff authority to make changes on in the transportation improvement program. They tend to be minor, but we do note all of those changes and provide them to you as well as the public. So this is just a listing of everything that's happened since last meeting. Also in your packet is our schedule or calendar for calendar year 2023. You'll note that we, for the next few months, we'll be meeting here in Mishawaka, as it was a popular choice last month and this month. And so we'll be here through at least March, and then we'll continue to explore really what we want to do throughout the summertime and the rest of the year. We are maintaining, though, the second Wednesday of the month as we have since 1973 or so. So second Wednesday of the month at 10 a.m. So that goes unchanged. We'll make sure, though, that if we do change location, that we make sure to let you know. But the next few months, please plan to show up in Mishawaka.
Any questions for James on that? Okay, any other old business?
There's no old business.
How about some new business?
There is new business, and Allison will present that.
Good morning, everyone. So our first amendment to our transportation improvement program this month falls under Transportation Resolution 38-22. So the city of South Bend was recently awarded $2.4 million through the federal RAISE grant. And this is for planning work related to removing infrastructure along the Eddy Street Bridge. So the project area for this will include the cloverleaf interchanges around the Eddy Street Bridge, as well as the street network around the South Bend Farmers Market. So we're adding this project to our TIP, and we're adding it under the name Market District Improvement Project. The work type is an interchange modification, and we're adding in preliminary engineering in fiscal year 2023 for an estimated cost to complete of $3 million. Any questions on this project? Hearing none, I would ask for your approval of Transportation Resolution 38-22.
Move to approve.
Second. I have a first and a second by Deb Fleming. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you.
And just an item to note on this on this project, you'll note the DES number, and you might not notice this, but the DES number is non-traditional in that it's not the typical 7 or however many digit numerical kind of DES number. It's a custom DES number. This is because we had to create that DES number. That's a very minor inconvenience, right? But it's an important thing to note because this is a very different experience for projects that are receiving discretionary funds. The projects that receive discretionary funds, and there are a lot of discretionary funds now being made available because of that new funding bill. INDOT doesn't have to, nor does it want to, have an ownership role in those discretionary projects. So typically, in all of the projects that you're used to experiencing, they are what's called the direct recipient, and you as a local government have received money through them in some way, and so you're the subrecipient. So they have to maintain oversight and different steps throughout the process that you participate in. With the discretionary grant programs, they don't have to be the direct recipient. You are now the direct recipient. So from a capacity perspective, they're saying, we don't want anything to do with projects that we don't have to be in charge of. And so they are assigning the city of South Bend a direct recipient status for this project. Now this project ends up being planning. And so there are really, the biggest federal challenge in a planning project is procurement. And then you're moving kind of forward from there. But if you think through on construction projects, this means that you're doing Uniform Relocation Act, you're doing environmental, and all of those things you have the technical capacities to do. It's just INDOT would not be a part of that, nor do they want to be a part of. There will be some unique challenges, say with environmental, where the state has all of those programmatic agreements with other entities, or you as a direct recipient would not have those programmatic agreements. So there may be some challenges being a direct recipient. This is not to dissuade you from ever applying as a direct recipient for construction. We're going to do a lot of that. It's just to alert you of the fact that discretionary projects like this will come with an additional oversight burden on you as a local government. So for a planning project, it ends up being very minor and very doable. For a construction project, it will be more complicated. Not that you don't have the technical capacity to do it, but I just want to make sure that you're never surprised as we move forward, because this is going to be more common because of the amount of discretionary programs that are available. So just an FYI. Sorry for the interruption.
great to make some notes on that.
Okay, moving on to our NDOT initiated projects, we have Transportation Resolution 39-22. So we have item A, this is a high friction surface treatment throughout various locations within the Fort Wayne district, so Elkhart and Kosciuszko. We're adding in preliminary engineering in fiscal year 2024 for an estimated cost to complete of about $1.4 million. Item B, this is at State Road 10 and Deer Creek. So this east of Argus and Marshall County. This is a bridge replacement. We are adding in right-of-way in fiscal year 2023. We already have preliminary engineering and construction in our tips currently. And the estimated cost to complete for that is about $1.1 million. Next, we have item C. So this is at State Road 13 from 3.53 miles south of US 6 to 1 mile south of US 6. So essentially all through the town of Syracuse. This is a structural HMA overlay, a hot mix asphalt overlay. And we're adding in preliminary engineering in fiscal year 2023 for an estimated cost to complete of about $2.7 million. And then finally, we have item D. This is at State Road 119 and County Road 7, so southeast of Wakarusa and Elkhart County. This is an intersection improvement with an added turn lane. We're adding in construction in fiscal year 2025 for an estimated cost to complete of about $3.3 million. Are there any questions on items A through D? Okay, hearing none, I would ask for your approval of Transportation Resolution 39-22.
So moved. Second.
I have a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item, resolution 40-22. This is a resolution to approve and certify updates to the MACOG Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan as required by the FTA. So as you all know, MACOG oversees the interurban trolley service over in Elkhart and Goshen, and we're a direct recipient of federal transit funds. We, under, I think it was the FAST Act, were required to create these public transportation agency safety plans. With the passing of the bipartisan infrastructure law, IJA, we had to change some language to reflect that new law and the requirements for agencies, especially those that operate in a small urban area like Elkhart and Goshen. And so we have made those changes. We're required to make those changes by December 31st of this year. So we'll be doing that in advance of that deadline. Some of the highlights briefly, this may not capture all of the highlights, but page 3, we were adding in safety performance targets that we weren't adding them in, but we were updating them based on the different years for new updated data, including languaging referencing frontline employees that was required as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Page 7, under the safety hazard identification, adding in language required utilizing the CDC, state, and other county health departments guidelines to help identify hazards and potential consequences as required in that new law. And then safety risk mitigation, including the required languages there as well. Those were some of the highlights. These are all required changes based on that IJA. Happy to answer any questions, but we would be asking for approval of that, the updates to that plan.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
All right, our next item, resolution 41-22, is a resolution to endorse the updated MACOG job descriptions document. Our job descriptions, it's been a few years since they were last updated. And in that time, our programming has gotten more complicated and more robust. And so we're looking to provide some updates to our job descriptions to allow for some restructuring of our divisions. It allows some of our subject matter experts to be better direct kind of managers of their programs, as well as then gives employees, because we do have employees with long tenures, some better career progression options. So our previous career progression options where, hey, you want to be a planner for the next 10 years? And that's an oversimplification of it. But this would allow some better structuring of what it looks like to be an entry-level employee versus 2 or 3 years on the job versus having more senior responsibilities, being a director of that program, and kind of those progressions throughout. So it's also, though, to update a number of the pay scales. As many of us have all experienced, pay scale over the last year and a half has definitely changed. And so we want to continue to be competitive and reflect that in our job descriptions to make sure that we can continue to retain and attract top talent. So that is the high-level summary of what we have done throughout the job descriptions. Happy to answer any of those questions and field any questions if you have any.
I mean, I think we've all experienced the same thing in our organizations where we're at. From a budgeting perspective, though, I mean, when would those, if these are approved, would that be retroactive or starting the first of the year? Do we have the budget to be able to cover that?
Yeah, so I would say that this is future looking more so than it is our direct budget. Right now, we've been able to maintain fairly competitive wages, but with the tenure of our employees and then the change in the market, we are starting to hit top scales. So a lot of this was also then an adjustment so that we're not just saying year over year,
Right.
well, sorry, you're at the max for your position.
Right.
So this provides opportunities to either provide more senior level work with pay increase as well, and or just some adjustments to those scales so that folks who have a long tenure and a senior status with us aren't being penalized by just being at the top of their pay scale.
Right.
So a lot of this is not necessarily to adjust everything right now from a pay perspective, to make sure that we have options in the future. When it comes to some of our restructuring, because we are looking to have, say, directors of particular divisions, so director of transportation or director of sustainability. Some of those we already have internal folks who are already functioning in that role. And so we'll start to make those changes here over the next month. For some of them, we would need to hire externally because we just need to attract someone from outside the organization. And so that's really it. We'll get them posted at the beginning of the year and then try and figure out what makes sense from there from a hire out perspective. Yep.
That's all good. I mean, it's something in today's world, trying to retain our talent and attract it is we're all competing over the same people.
Any other questions for James on the job? Do you need a motion to accept?
Yes, we would want the board to endorse and accept this document because ultimately the board gives the authority to the executive director to figure out pay and all of those things. But this document kind of gives me the working authority of what to work within. So we would want the board to endorse and approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, opposed? Great. Thank you. Next, we have Connect Transit Plan Brief. Scudder, I saw was online.
Good
Yeah.
morning. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And I just need to actually share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my slideshow now?
Yeah, it's loading right now.
There we go. There we go. So good to be back to give you all a quick briefing on the draft recommendations. You all gave us policy direction when I believe I last presented to you all in September, I believe it was. And we have then taken that and now developed a draft recommendations report and are going out to the public now. We just started with that last week. I wanted to give you all a quick overview of what's in those recommendations and what's coming up over the next 2 months. So quickly, for the interurban trolley services in Elkhart and Goshen, we have short-term recommendations and a 10-year additional funding network recommendations. The short-term recommendations based on policy direction we heard from you all was to maintain coverage as much as possible And in case of Goshen, who has committed to additional funding for some additional service, emphasize coverage in the expansion of service there. So this is the existing network, always color-coded by frequency. Dark blue is every 30 minutes, green is every 60-minute service. And this is the short-term recommended network. The first thing to note is that we're using numbers now instead of letters. As we add new routes, as we've got a couple of new routes here in Goshen, we start running out of easy primary colors to use. And also, there are often a number of cultural connections to different colors, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. And also, colors make it harder sometimes to help people with other languages understand the service. So we're recommending shifting to numbering. And so the yellow line is number 30, the red line is number 50, and you see a number, most Elkhart routes are in the 30s and Goshen routes are in the 50s, you'll see in most of our recommendations. In Elkhart, a lot of things in the short-term network, which is on the right, are very similar to today's network, which is on the left. Just the most significant changes are related to the orange line no longer going to Concord Mall, and then the red line not going through the parking lot of Concord Mall, given that that mall is mostly not operating anymore as a significant destination for shopping. And that changing of that on the orange line gives us more time that we can use to go through some of the industrial areas around Middlebury and County Road 17 up there north of Ivy Tech. So that gives us a bit more connection to other job centers as opposed to Concord Mall. And of course, that area is still served by the red line. There's a few other tweaks, very minor in terms of how we're serving some shopping centers on Cassopolis, but very tiny tweaks in those areas. There's also some tweaks in downtown Elkhart that we go to in much more detail in our report that you can read about there. In Goshen, we've added service, and by adding service, we've revised a few things. Number one, we've revised the red line to go by the new county courthouse location. And we have added a new Route 52 with the additional funding that serves Lincoln, Basher corridors out to the west of Goshen. We've added an extension of the Route 52 to serve the north portions of Goshen, Chamberlain, the apartments up off of the north part of Goshen, and also getting close to Oakland Hospital. It's very hard for us to actually get into the hospital complex, but we do outline in the report how you can we can make some changes, or the city and MACOG and Interurban Trolley can work together to make it possible to access the hospital. And then to the south, we reorient the red line, the 50, to serve Goshen Hospital and Goshen College more directly and go down via Kircher before serving the industrial area. And the service to Greencroft is now on this new hourly Route 53. This means a shorter walk to service for people who are in Greencroft, but less frequent service. So that's a bit of a trade-off. We are working with Greencroft, and Jeremiah in particular is working with Greencroft community to determine their preferences for routing actually through Greencroft. But this is the overall pattern we're recommending. We also in the report outline a set of recommendations for what to do if you can fund an additional 80% increase in service. That would cost approximately $3 to $3.5 million a year in operating cost. Not all of that would have to be from local sources, but some of it would need to come from local sources if you were going to add this much service. This map shows the improvements in service, the extension of service, a lot of it in more frequent services, such as more frequent service on Cassopolis every 30 minutes, a new route going out to the Amazon facility, more frequent service to Pierre Moran in Elkhart, and more frequent service on the route on Lincoln in Goshen and on going through Greencroft in Goshen, and a new route going out to East Goshen. The report identifies a number of stair-step levels of investment you can make over time to eventually get to this level of investment, such as what it would take to just add this service to Amazon, or what it would take to just add this more frequent route to Pierre Moran, as well as the things that aren't obvious on this map, which is that 80% increase in service includes assumptions about increasing service in the evening, where you currently do not have any service in the evenings, and adding service on Sunday, which is a sizable addition. It's another 1/7 or 1/6 of your budget, effectively, in order to add Sunday service. So just very quickly, a few of the outcomes that we highlight in the report. The existing network, you serve about 59% of residents. 34% of them are within a half a mile of 30-minute service. These short-term recommendations mean you would now reach about 70% of residents in Elkhart and Goshen, but slightly fewer would be near 30-minute service because of some of the changes in that hourly service in Goshen. The additional funding network with that investment in more frequency means about almost half of the population of Elkhart or Goshen would be near 30-minute service if you fully implemented that additional funding network. And you would be serving about 70% still of residents of the two communities. And if we look at jobs in terms of how many jobs are near any kind of service today, about 53% of jobs are near any kind of service, and about 33% are near 30-minute service. The short-term recommended network, because of the addition of those hourly routes, increases jobs covered to about 62% of jobs reachable by transit. Still only 32% reachable by 30-minute service because we're not adding any more 30-minute routes. The additional funding network would get you to about to a significant increase now to about 64% of jobs reachable by some kind of transit, and 46 within a half a mile of a 30-minute or better route. So nearly half your jobs served by service that's every 30 minutes or better, which is a significant improvement. We also do some analysis about how many jobs can you reach within a certain amount of travel time. There's a lot more detail in our report about how this analysis functions, but effectively think about if you're starting a trip from kind of anywhere in Goshen, how far can you get in 60 minutes, including your walking time to a stop, your waiting time at the stop, your riding time, your transfer time to another route. And if we can analyze that basically at any point across Goshen, Elkhart, or any part of the service area. And today, the average person from any given point could reach about 25,000 jobs within 60 minutes of travel time. The short-term network, which is the second bar in blue, for the average resident, we don't change how many jobs you can reach in 60 minutes of travel time. Even though we're covering more jobs, for example, because we're using mostly low frequency service, it doesn't dramatically increase how many jobs people can reach. So we don't move the needle dramatically on that factor. That added budget or added funding network, because we're adding more 30-minute service to a lot of places, means you can get somewhere more quickly because you have less waiting. And we move the needle more significantly for the average resident being able to reach 17% more jobs in a 60-minute travel time in that additional funding network. So that's what these three bars on the left side of this graph are showing you for the average resident. We can do the same kind of analysis for the average resident of color and for the average low-income resident in order to assess how we're doing on measures of equity, which is important for thinking about civil rights requirements under Title VI. So that's a quick summary of Elkhart and Goshen. I just want to show you very quickly South Bend and Mishawaka. This is the existing network for Transpo in South Bend and Mishawaka. And this is the short-term network. One of the things I want to highlight for you all is you'll notice that this Route 30, which is the replacement of the yellow line, it is effectively the yellow line. In the recommendations for this for South Bend and Mishawaka and for the entire region is that this service, the 30, goes through Mishawaka and onward into downtown South Bend. So it's one continuous route from downtown South Bend through Mishawaka and onward to Elkhart, so that you would now have a one-seat ride between the three downtowns for a somewhat faster trip, because you'd have less waiting and not require a transfer at Mishawaka anymore to connect between the two downtowns. So that's a significant positive improvement, we feel like, that is effectively free in the short term by just combining those services that currently today, the Mishawaka Avenue service is just by Transpo on their Route 9. And then in South Bend and Mishawaka, we have that same additional funding set of recommendations over potentially a 10-year period that includes some significant improvements in frequency, where routes like Route 10, Route 7, Route 3, we would recommend getting up to 15-minute frequency, and that are therefore red on this map, which is a very useful level of frequency. And increase other routes that are currently hourly to every 30 minutes, as well as similar improvements in the evening and adding Sunday service as we've recommended for the interurban trolley. And these improvements add up to about an 85% increase in service for Transpo. So quickly, this is the start, as of last week, the start of our engagement around this draft plan. These draft recommendations are just that. They are draft. They've been based on 2 rounds of public engagement and conversation going back to February. And in particular, that concepts phase where we presented to you all a couple of times and got your policy input. So we have a major website update, connecttransitplan.com, where you can get more detail there about these recommendations. You can download the full 60-page report that goes into more detail on some specifics, such as a few improvements in stop locations in a couple places. We have an online survey to gather feedback about how people respond to these recommendations, and that survey will remain open through the end of January. And beginning at the beginning of January, MACOG staff and some of our staff will go out to do pop-up tables at South Street Station, ride buses to gather feedback. And we're also working on having one-on-one follow-ups with key partners, key community organizations. And so if you all have any particular organizations or groups you'd like us to try to meet with one-on-one over the next 2 months, please do reach out to MACOG staff to help us get those scheduled. And we have 4 in-person open houses scheduled in January. For Elkhart, it would be January 11th at the downtown library from 4 to 6 p.m. and in Goshen at the public library downtown on January 12th from 4 to 6 p.m. And then we also have the Mishawaka and South Bend open houses earlier in the week, that week. So finally, once we finish with this round of engagement, we will come back to you all to give you an update of what we've heard from the public at your February board meeting, and any suggested and recommended changes that we have based on that feedback. And that will be a key moment where we really need to know, are there any other things that you all feel need to be changed? Because we will then be revising and finalizing the plan and coming back to you with that final recommended plan at your March meeting for your adoption of this Connect Transit Plan. So with that, happy to take questions and see if there's any discussion of these recommendations.
So we're definitely a quiet group this morning. Maybe everybody should have sugar.
What kind of participation did you get at the committee meetings?
Last week's meetings?
The stakeholder ones, or just kind of throughout the process so far?
Community meetings in particular.
So I don't have the stats in front of me, but, Scudder, how many from the surveys over the last 2 or 3 different cycles, how many surveys have been filled out?
Yeah, so that that round 2 surveying that we did over the summer, we had more than 500, I think it was almost 600 respondents to that survey. And some of those respondents only answered questions about South Bend and Mishawaka. Some only answered questions about Elkhart and Goshen. And for each of the communities, we had close to 300 responses to the concepts. And the public in-person community meetings, I don't have the numbers in front of me about the attendance at those over the summer. We could get to you on that. I believe we may have some numbers actually in the report. Our stakeholder meetings that we've had that I've been there in person to help facilitate have had probably on average about 30 to 35 attendees at each of them over the three meetings we've had, February, June, and then last week.
So, I mean, you're talking about each of those stakeholder meetings. Those are usually different nonprofits, support organizations, local governments, folks who have potential clients that are writing. Those kind of folks are our stakeholders usually. And so each one of those 3 meetings has had 30 to 40 folks in attendance to learn about that process. And you're talking about all the public meetings that we're doing, which, public meetings don't always have the best of attendance. Some of them have had, the one at the South Bend Library on the last session probably had 30 or 40 people come through, which was a really good turnout. But most of them tend to average in the public meetings in the 5 to 10 category. We probably had for 8 or 9 of those meetings over the last year. And then the second survey, as Scudder mentioned, had about 600, 300 from each. We had a survey before that was about 800 results. So, I mean, in no way do I feel like we've engaged every single resident within Elkhart and St. Joseph County, but we have definitely tried to try and reach as many folks as possible, especially the ones who are using the service. So a lot of those results aren't just the general public. A lot of those folks are riders as well. So I know staff has devoted a ton of time to making themselves available at the transfer centers, on vehicles, trying to actually engage our existing riders at both Transpo and the trolleys. So it's been a large undertaking, but I feel like compared to any other operational analysis that has been done throughout the history of Transpo or the trolley, that this has had far the most public engagement.
So another question I had, he had a slide up there that kind of showed the number of jobs that this was providing transportation to, but was given a total number, but is there a percentage of the total jobs in that area? I mean, so let's say they're getting service to 20,000 jobs, but is there 100,000 jobs in that area? I'm just trying to get a realm of the magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have that information and we show it in different ways. This is of all jobs across the entire kind of community. But I mean, you have maps that show dot densities in certain areas and those kind of things. The other things that is important to note that this board did approve as a potential recommendation, not as a potential, as a recommendation from the study that we've gotten kind of the initial green light to already start on, is the van pool program. So a lot of the jobs that we're talking about that we tend to focus on here are probably more on the commercial side of things, right? Jobs on different commercial corridors like Grape or Main or those kind of areas. But the jobs that are harder to reach by public transit, by fixed route, are industrial jobs. They tend to be further away. They tend to be large blocks. They tend to be inconvenient for a bus to get someone close to their time clock, right? Just because you drive by a multi-thousand square foot facility doesn't mean that you got anywhere near where that person has to enter and go punch in. And so one of the strategies that has been successful kind of universally across the country, and there are a number of places that we could cite in the Midwest, is van pool programs, partnering with someone like hypothetically like an enterprise or someone else like that, where they're providing vehicles. You work with employers to find folks who will van pool together. Is a strategy that's worked in a number of markets. And that's also a strategy that could benefit our rural areas, because if you have folks that are commuting from St. Joe down to Marshall County, or Marshall County back to St. Joe, or Kosciuszko into Elkhart, those van pool programs would be able to service those areas, whereas our fixed route buses you're never going to see a transpo bus drive down US 31 to Plymouth. That's just not a plausible scenario from a time perspective. And so it's a strategy that can really help our rural areas as well as then our urban areas as well. So that is something that we are moving forward in addition to these fixed route changes that are being presented. That is something that this board already gave us approval to start to move forward on. So next year we'll be issuing an RFP to see if there are vendors who could help us with that. So that could grow over time. I know in Kosciuszko County right now, there's already like 9 van pools that operate just independently because of, you know, what their employers do or whatnot, that are largely a Fort Wayne commute.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned too that you request funding from, I assume, local governments. So a taxing entity asking another taxing unit for funding. What's that look like? Since Transpo is a taxing unit, they have options at their disposal to raise revenue. But so what's the thought behind that?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that there's 2 different entities here, right? Like while MACOG is partnering to deliver this study, this is a partnership with Transpo. The service that MACOG operates oversees over in Elkhart and Goshen, we are not a taxing entity. We're a PBS model where viewers like you can donate to the program. But you know, so we aren't a taxing authority. And so if we were looking at service additions, it is largely how can we raise revenue? And that's probably a formal ask. You know, I'm not making any formal ask tomorrow, but that is something that if we wanted to move forward with additional service in Elkhart and Goshen, we would have to try and figure out the revenue side of it. Transpo is different because they are a PTC, a Public Transportation Corporation. They have their own taxing authority. So they do have those options to try and figure out, you know, a referendum or those kind of things. There will be some things that we'll have to look into of whether or not they really, truly, fully do have the authority to move forward with referendums. That's always been a little odd, and I don't have the exact details because the state legislature has always controlled a little bit of what PTCs can really do in terms of referendum. It might also be exploring options where we are talking to local governments about pilots, right? Where we can show folks what additional funding might do for public transportation. It might be them asking MACOG for additional CMAQ funding because congestion mitigation and air quality funding does fund public transportation. It's an eligible option. So I think it will be a variety of strategies. And it might also be working with specific stakeholders. One, for example, that wasn't shown here would be, you know, the Pokagon ban, because you have the casino as well as then the new hotel there. They're going to have a number of employees that they're trying to get out to that area, and providing transportation could be extremely beneficial. But something like that, it might be asking for direct funding from them. So I don't think that we have an exact strategy today on what the funding requests would look like. But I think more the conversation that we're trying to have is this is what additional investment can buy. And then trying to figure out if that makes sense to either local governments or through CMAQ or other private dollars. I know that's a non-answer answer, but
The private or the pilot model seems a little risky because you implement services. Then if you say seek a referendum and don't get it, then what happens then? You cancel the services, and then once you do that, who's to blame?
Sure.
And then, or is it required, perpetual funding forever from a municipality, another taxing entity? So,
yeah, I mean, it's something that we're cognizant of. We're trying to figure out those strategies to figure out, what options are available. But before we just ask, or before Transpo just asks for more money from anyone, I think it's important to know what does it look like in the thing we're investing in, right? What are we going to buy with more funding? And I think that's where this study kind of walks through what potentially you could get out of that.
We need more police officers that aren't funded yet, so hopefully we can
Absolutely.
ask another taxing entity to do it.
Yep, we completely understand. We know that there are not endless funds available, and so, but we do want to try and show what does it look like. Yep.
Thank you, Scudder.
All right. Well, thank you all very much.
All right, let's move to the staff update. First, we have grants and funding with Allison.
So real quickly, just wanted to give an update on some funding opportunities that are currently available. So NDOT will be issuing a notice of funding availability for bridge preventative maintenance. This will open January 2nd and be open for the entire month of January. Funding is available at fiscal year 2028 with the possibility of projects being pulled forward if available. But to be eligible, LPAs must submit a bridge asset management plan to NDOT by this Friday. So happy to answer questions or talk after about this. And then the second one is NDOT's Community Crossings Matching Grant, which we're all familiar with. Funding available for road and bridge preventative maintenance. So the 2023 January call will open January 3rd and close January 27th. So both in that January timeframe. But if you or your staff need help with this, we're happy to provide assistance. And I also wanted to note, so for the second call in July that NDOT just announced awards, there were roughly $6.3 million awarded within the MACOG region. And then that combined with 2021 or 2022 first call, it's about $15 million that were awarded in the MACOG region throughout calendar year 2022. So definitely a beneficial program for our region. So again, happy to talk after if anyone has any questions.
Real quick, Allison,
Yeah.
with the number of folks representing counties in the room, could you kind of walk through for folks the new aspect with the NDOT call for the bridge asset management plans and eligibility? I know we talked about it a little bit before, but just to remind everyone about it.
Yeah, so the bridge asset management plans that are required for this NDOT call are slightly different than the bridge asset management plans that are submitted to LTAP every year. So there are a few additional columns that are required to be submitted. NDOT does have guidance on their website about what is required, and that is going to be emailed to, I put the email on the slide, but it's NDOT LPA NPO.
Yep.
Yeah, at ndot.in.gov. So those can be emailed to that address.
Yeah, and so that bridge asset management plan, there are a few extra data points that are needed to take it from something that makes it eligible for community crossings to making it eligible for federal funds. So that if you wanted to fund some, what I would call bundled bridge maintenance projects, where, hey, you want to do 6 deck overlays on these 6 bridges to extend the life of those bridges. You could do that through the federal program if you wanted, but in order to do that, before you can compete for those funds, you have to have an eligible federal approved asset management plan. And so I know we're helping a number of the counties with that, but I just want to make sure that you as elected officials are aware of that. So now there is an additional option that historically has not been available for you for maintenance. Not saying that it's your preferred option, because it is federal money, and that means that now theoretically, as Allie pointed out, you might be able to move it forward, but theoretically you're not doing that maintenance project until 28. So it's not exactly a preferred option. Now it's very plausible that you won't have right of way, or you might not have large environmentals. So this is something that could slide in earlier. So NDOT would probably look at those options, and you might be able to get it done sooner. But it is an option now that's available to you that historically has not been available to you. So just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, and I will note last week, Purdue LTAP put out a webinar about the difference between an LTAP approved asset management plan versus an NDOT approved asset management plan. And a representative from each of our counties was on, and we attended with some NDOT folks. So I think there is good documentation on what the differences are, but happy to share more afterwards. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to give a quick update and kind of make you aware that the Indiana Trails program is back up and available again. Applications are due by March 1st, and it's for funding for projects between $100,000 and $400,000. So relatively minor construction projects, acquisition that would fall within that price range. And then it's an 80-20 match program. So if you have projects that you are interested in, we would be glad to help you put an application together.
Has anybody reached out from Marshall County Park Board?
Not to me, anyway.
Okay, I'll have somebody.
Yeah.
Give you that.
Yeah.
Reach out.
Sounds great.
How competitive do you think that's going to be?
That's a good question.
I mean, they raised,
Depends on how good your
well,
request is.
they raised the max because it used to be 250 and now it's 400. So there's more available per award, which could, I don't remember, but is the pot bigger or is the pot the same?
I'm going to say it's the same.
So it was already a highly subscribed program. Now you can get more per award, which means that they could issue theoretically less awards with the same amount of money.
Right.
So it's already a competitive program. And I mean, Trails continues to be across the state something of
life.
Quality of life, but a major kind of emphasis area for a lot of communities. So I think it will, fair guess is that it would be fairly competitive, but Dustin can help you be competitive.
But I also think the inflationary factor is on the construction side. I mean,
Sure.
These projects continue to escalate.
Yeah.
What's an average mile? Isn't it like
Million?
one? Yeah.
For
So
trail.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's
Probably
part of what
$1.5 million.
this is
I thought it was
Maybe
at least 1.2.
more-
So
better suited for trailhead signage, that kind of stuff.
This through DNR.
It is through DNR. Yeah, it used to be, if I recall, used to be federal money, but they've exchanged it now where I believe it's state money.
Correct.
So, yeah, but it is through DNR.
A little less hoops to go through.
Okay.
great. Thank you, Dustin. Regional freight mobility plan update, please.
So I, real quickly before we went to this update, I did want to give you another update related to grant opportunity. So the fiscal year 23 raise grants, those will be coming up. They have a partial NOCO currently posted. They're supposed to have a full notice of funding posted today, but that's the Rebuilding American Infrastructure Sustainability and Equity for Surface Transportation Projects. The due date for that grant application is kind of coming up fairly quickly. It'll be the end of February. So if you have any kind of larger projects that you're considering that make kind of a good opportunity, minimum grant awards are $5 million, and they can go to up to $25 million. In rural areas, that's lower. So that's $1 million for a minimum size grant. So yeah, there should be more information coming out this week, hopefully today. But if that's something you're kind of interested in, feel free to get in touch with us because we're happy to help go through kind of that process with you. So related to a freight mobility, regional freight mobility plan. So we're kind of in the final stretch of completing that plan. We're currently finalizing a first draft of the priorities for improvement, which is the last section incorporated into our plan. The goal for this is to kind of have that finalized by January. And so we come out to our steering committee stakeholder groups again with that kind of full plan package together for review and comment. And then hopefully in the following months, we would have the opportunity to put that out for public comment in part of the year.
And then another plan that we're working on, Michigan on the 2050 transportation plan. We're still in kind of our public engagement phase of that plan. We have currently a survey open. So far, I think we've got about 150 responses, and we'd really love to kind of receive more input throughout the region on that. And I'm not sure how many, we have a comment map as well that's available online to kind of identify transportation needs and projects and things like that. But I'm still looking for good opportunities to kind of partner with communities or local events to kind of come to where the people are to collect input in this first phase. The plan would be to have our survey out for about another month. We're going to be putting up some display areas in local libraries, as well as having some pop-up events throughout this coming month and a half.
When's the survey due or close?
We're going to close it the mid-January. So,
Sorry.
yep. All right. And so in October, I have a quick update from the October meeting where the board adopted the performance measures and targets for supported the Indiana Department of Transportation targets. And there was a request to kind of provide a little bit of context for where those targets had come from. So some past information. So I have a lengthy presentation. I'm just kidding. I just have, I wanted to do kind of a high level. So Federal Highway actually does have kind of a dashboard where they report state targets. And you can kind of see it down here, the federal, that link right here. They have, so a dashboard that includes the what the state is reporting each year. This is a high level of the safety targets, highway infrastructure, so that includes roads and bridges and pavement condition, highway reliability, so truck travel time index, and then emissions reduction. So the ones that I'm going to go through are mainly related to safety and infrastructure condition. So looking at this line is the kind of baseline for fatalities throughout the state of Indiana. So you can kind of see the trends that are happening. The blue line is the 5-year averages. So they've been increasing. And then the red diamonds are kind of the targets that have been set from 2020 to 2022. And the October meeting, we set a target of 894, so slightly kind of higher than the 2022 target. I wanted to note that in the past, all of these safety targets have kind of been based upon trends and kind of where they foresee fatalities heading versus maybe goals that they'd like to achieve. And so beginning next year, the bipartisan infrastructure law doesn't require targets to be set higher. So we'll likely see that those targets are going to level off. And the state will then have kind of a goal that they need to achieve below that. So this is for fatalities. This is the fatality rate, which is based upon 100 million VMT. So you can see it's still kind of increasing. Our fatality rate that was adopted for 23 is just slightly higher than the 2022 target. And this is the trends for the number of serious injuries. The target that was set in Indiana was 3,348, which falls about right here. So quite a bit higher than the 2022 target that was last set. And then the serious injury rate is showing a slight decrease from the 2022 target. And then for the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, the target that we set was 399, which is quite a bit higher than the 2022 target, which was set at 344. And then for infrastructure conditions, targets that are set include interstate condition, but this is just showing non-interstate. I thought that would be a little bit more relevant. You can see that the original 4-year target was 40%, and our 2024 target and 2026 target are slightly higher than that at 50% and 48%. In poor condition, very similar targets, but they'll be significant or half lower at 1.5%. And then this is for bridge conditions on the national highway system. The target for 2024 is 49%, which is higher than the 2022 target. And then bridges in poor condition set at a similar rate. All right. So that was kind of a skinny view of some of the targets. If you're interested in kind of viewing some of the other baseline conditions for things like emissions reduction or reliability, feel free to reach out to me, and I can provide a little bit more information.
Thank you.
And then just our final update, our third quarter quarterly tracking meeting will be January 12th. This will walk through all of our federal aid projects we have currently. So your staff will be receiving an email from us next week, details on this.
Privilege of the floor.
I'm sorry, public comment.
I think we'll have one public comment.
So any privilege of the floor?
Well, I would like to thank everyone, past executive director Sandy Senoren, James Kernwald, and MACOG Policy Board for the years that I will not be returning next year in January. Commissioner Mike Burrow is going to be taking my place, so I just wanted to say thank you. I never knew what an acronym was until I came here. And several years ago, I asked Sandy to put a book together of the acronyms because, and believe me, there's more acronyms now than what there was back then. So you might want to update that. But it's just time for me to move on. I've been here since I don't know when, probably 2000. You know, James? Because I was here when Sandy.
I was gonna say it predates me, so it would be prior to 2008.
Yeah, so I just want to thank everybody, and it's been a privilege to serve on this board. And MACOG truly is a partner with all the communities, the counties, and the cities and towns, because there's a lot of things that never would have happened over the years if it wasn't for this policy board in support of Marshall County. So I just wanted to thank you all, and good luck next year. Thank you. That was a shock, I'm
I was
sure.
gonna say, I didn't know that it would be your last meeting, so I don't have anything prepared.
Well, maybe that's why I did
And I don't like this.
I
so,
do.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, Commissioner, thank you for your years of service. You've been an invaluable member to MACOG, represented Marshall County extremely well,
Thank you.
accomplished so much.
A lot.
And so I really thank you for your years of service, and sorry that we can't recognize it in the way that I would want to, but I'm sure you appreciate
I appreciate
the way that we are going to recognize
words
it.
is enough.
Yeah, so thank you.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure to work with you. We've seen you give your blood, sweat, and tears for your community. That's a true public servant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Speaking of giving blood, sweat, and tears, you can give blood at the bus. In our parking lot, the mayor's blood drive is going on right now. So on your way out, please feel free to make a deposit. So
Yeah, public
How
comment.
much you paying?
I'll give you a cookie, I think.
Oh, okay.
Any other privilege of the floor? All right, so now let's move to public comment.
Public comment.
Aj Patel, I'm with the Happy Marshall Consultants. I'm their Business and Government Strategy Director. Yesterday, I received a comment by Megan Graham Fishel. I just want to share that with you. James and I talked on the phone last night. He is the person, his title is Broadband Program Specialist with the U.S. Department of Commerce. Indiana is going to be receiving anywhere between $700 million and $1 billion over the next 5 years for broadband. And so Graham is in this area today. He wasn't able to be here, but he does want to get in front of you just to share what's going on in terms of the federal dollars coming to Indiana so that you're aware of internet service providers and how they can apply for these funds and how you as local elected officials can engage with those folks. So I met with them personally back in November. And just real quick, the download speeds that they're looking for in communities is 100 and the upload speeds are 20. So I'll just work with James to coordinate that if it works for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to see those levels change. It'd be nice to see upload speeds change as well. Now let's keep going. Any other privilege or public comment? Okay, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Everyone have a very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays.
I was just gonna say.
Yep.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.